On June 9th, hundreds of thousands took to the streets of Hong Kong to protest a bill that would allow for the extradition of people from Hong Kong to mainland China. In the following months, Hong Kongers would protest several more times, and at its peak, organizers claimed that 2 million people, or over a fourth of Hong Kong's population, attended rallies in opposition to the now withdrawn legislation. These days, the protests have become regular occurrences, with demonstrations happening at least every week. By now, the protests have evolved to represent a variety of movements, interests, and demands, but mostly, people marched to protest what they felt was an erosion of their freedoms and their autonomy from China. Hong Kong is no stranger to protest. Since Hong Kong's return to China in 1997, the city has protested almost every year since then, on scales large and small, and for a variety of reasons. But why is that? Why does Hong Kong have its own freedoms and laws? Why are demonstrations so frequent? To really understand the answers to those questions and the origins of Hong Kong's current troubles, you have to go back, way back, all the way to 1842. Hong Kong, as most people know it, began in that year when the Daoguang Emperor signed the Treaty of Nanking with the English to end the First Opium War. In exchange for peace, the Chinese signed away Hong Kong to the British, and this would be the beginning of colonial rule in Hong Kong. In 1860, in order to end the Second Opium War, the Chinese ceded Kowloon. Then, in 1898, the United Kingdom was given a 99-year lease on the new territories and 235 surrounding islands, because the diplomat who negotiated the treaty thought that a 99-year lease would be as good as forever. The English had no intention of giving Hong Kong back, but eventually this agreement would have massive implications for the future of the colony.
At first, the colony's importance lay in the revenue it received from the opium trade, but over time, opium became less important, and after the Japanese occupation in 1941, the English colony was no longer dependent on revenue from the illicit drug.
As the 1950s rolled around, larger numbers of refugees from China began immigrating to Hong Kong to escape the communist revolution and the political instability sweeping China at the time. Foreign firms began relocating from Shanghai to Hong Kong, and by then, in the minds of many, the little port city had become the replacement for the surrendered Shanghai in China. The stability and predictability of British law and governance allowed Hong Kong to flourish as an international center of trade and eventually of finance. Through the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, millions more would immigrate to the city from China in search of better opportunities that were unavailable on the mainland, and Hong Kong would come to position itself as a center of tourism and the premier city of Asia. Hong Kong's small size and large population gave rise to the thousands of high-rise buildings that dot Hong Kong's skyline today. Favorable economic conditions, Western influence, as well as good governance and a high degree of freedom has allowed Hong Kong to become one of the least corrupt societies in the world, one of the safest cities on earth, the freest economy in the world, and the economic gateway to China. Although not everybody may wave the Hong Kong colonial flag, many still see the past few decades of colonial rule as a sort of golden age for Hong Kong. It was a time when Hong Kong's cultural significance was at its peak, and when few felt that their freedoms were being infringed upon. But remember that 99-year lease attained in 1898 that the Brits felt was as good as forever? Well, by 1997 that lease was set to expire, and Deng Xiaoping, then the de facto leader of China, began to express his desire to retake the city and reincorporate it as a Chinese territory. So in 1997, in a grand ceremony, Hong Kong was returned to China, and on July 1st, the sun set on British Hong Kong for the very last time. As per the agreement between the UK and China, Hong Kongers would keep their freedoms and would be given autonomy from China until 2047, which brings us to the present. Hong Kong is still a vibrant city and an economic powerhouse, but many feel that it is at risk of being taken over by China before that was supposed to happen. Universal suffrage still has not been granted to the people as promised, and a majority feel that the government doesn't represent the city's interests, as it is full of pro-Beijing politicians, despite the public never having voted in a pro-Beijing majority into the Legislative Council, which is Hong Kong's lawmaking body. The sentiment among many protesters is that Carrie Lam, the current leader and chief executive, is simply a puppet of the Communist Party, and that she's incapable of representing Hong Kong's interests and managing the current political crisis. With the introduction of the extradition bill coming as another sign of China's encroachment on the territory, it seemed that people were pushed over the edge, and in an unprecedented show of dissatisfaction with the current government, an alleged 2 million took to the streets to protest. Hong Kong remains an economic powerhouse, though things have been slowing down. with some being quick to point to the protests as the reason for the recent economic downturn. There is still a great amount of uncertainty about Hong Kong's future, as well as a creeping sense of hopelessness among Hong Kong's youth in the face of an encroaching China. Many feel lost and worry that the Hong Kong that they knew may be taken away from them. Many of the student protesters feel that now is their last chance to fight for freedom. It seems that at this point, only time will tell if Hong Kong can hold out as a beacon of freedom and prosperity for the years to come, or if it will be unceremoniously reabsorbed into China and fade away, relegating the once free and prosperous Hong Kong into the past, only to become a memory of what once was.